All right, let's get right into a really fascinating and kind of surprising piece of military history. We're going to look at secret communications, at codes, but maybe not the kind you're thinking of. We're pitting a complex machine against the power of human language, and the results are pretty mind-blowing.
So let me just start with a big question. When you think of the ultimate, most secure, unbreakable code of the last century, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's usually one of two very famous examples.
Maybe you're thinking of the German Enigma machine, right? This incredible piece of engineering that was supposed to be totally foolproof. And it's a great guess, but as we all know, it was eventually broken. Now, just to be super clear, Enigma was used by Germany in World War II. It has absolutely nothing to do with the conflicts in South America we're about to discuss. It's just a point of comparison.
Okay, so what about the Navajo code talkers from World War II? An amazing story that was kept secret for decades. We are definitely getting a lot warmer with that one. But they actually weren't the first or the only time this incredible strategy was used.
No, the real answer, and where our story really begins, is something way more organic, something that wasn't even planned. It was the Guarani language, spoken by the people of Paraguay.
So let's dive into our first case study here, Guarani. This is the story of how the everyday language of an army became its greatest weapon, almost entirely by accident.
To understand what happened, you have to understand where it happened. This is the Grand Chaco Boreal, and it is a brutal, brutal place. We're talking about 300,000 square kilometers. That's bigger than the entire country of Italy. It's a landscape of scorching heat, very little water, and just endless, dense, thorny scrub. They literally called it the Green Hell.
So, from 1932 to 1935, Paraguay and Bolivia fought this incredibly bloody war for control of those 300,000 square kilometers. If you were a betting person, you would have put all your money on Bolivia. They had a much bigger population, better weapons, even German military advisors. But on the ground, in the thick of it, something else happened. The Paraguayan soldiers, and we're talking over 90% of them, were native Guarani speakers, so they just started talking to each other over the radio in their own language.
And this is the absolute key to the whole thing. There wasn't some grand strategy meeting. There was no complex cipher to create. The soldiers were just talking, communicating in the same language they used back home with their families. There wasn't a code to break because there really wasn't a code to begin with.
And the result? For 3 long years of war, Bolivian intelligence was listening in on these Paraguayan radio transmissions, and they were hearing complete gibberish. They had nothing. No dictionaries, no one who could interpret it, no way in. The Guarani language itself became this unbreakable fortress, not because it was designed to be, but simply because it was.
Okay, so now let's jump forward a few years to our second example, which takes this whole concept and cranks it up a notch. This is where the US military looks at the idea of a language-based code and decides to turn it into a deliberate, carefully designed weapon of war.
It's 1942. The US is fighting in the Pacific, and they have a massive problem. Japanese intelligence is really good. They are consistently intercepting and cracking American military codes, which is costing lives. They needed something new, something faster, and something way, way more secure.
And this is where you find one of the most profound ironies in modern history. The solution? It came from the Navajo people. Think about this. For decades, the official U.S. government policy was to eradicate Native American languages. They forced Navajo children into boarding schools and punished them for speaking their mother tongue. And now, in its moment of greatest need, that same government turns to that very language, desperately hoping it will save them.
Now, unlike the spontaneous use of Guarani, this was a purpose-built system. The code talkers created a whole dictionary of code words for military terms. So a submarine became Beshlo, which translates to iron fish. A fighter plane became Dehetihi, or hummingbird. So what they did was layer a secret code on top of an already incredibly complex and unwritten language. It was basically uncrackable and unbelievably fast to transmit. And was it effective? Oh yeah. During the absolutely horrific battle for Iwo Jima, the code talkers sent more than 800 messages without a single mistake. A top signals officer there, Major Howard Connor, said it flat out. Without the Navajos, the Marines would have never taken Iwo Jima. And just like Guarani, the Navajo code was never, ever broken.
Okay, so for our final case study, let's look at the other side of the coin.
While Paraguay and the United States were leaning into the power of human language, Germany was putting all its faith into a machine. And again, just to be clear, this is a completely separate conflict and technology. The Enigma machine had zero connection to the Chaco War.
Look at that number. That is the number of possible settings for the German Enigma machine per day. It's over 158 quintillion. I mean, it's a number so huge you can barely wrap your head around it. Mathematically speaking, it should have been impossible to break. The Germans were absolutely convinced it was. But Enigma had a weak spot, a fatal flaw, and it had nothing to do with the rotors or the wiring. The biggest vulnerability was the one thing the brilliant designers just couldn't engineer away: the human beings who actually used the machine. So, how was Enigma beaten? Not by some supercomputer trying 158 quintillion combinations. It was beaten by boredom, by laziness, by simple human routine. Operators would send the same weather report at the same time every day. They'd use lazy keyboard patterns like QWERTY or just hit the same letter over and over. They wouldn't follow all the rules for changing the settings. These tiny, predictable shortcuts were the cracks in the armor that Alan Turing and his team at Bletchley Park needed to blow the whole thing wide open. Okay, so let's pull all three of these stories together. We've got an organic language, a deliberately weaponized language, and a supposedly perfect machine. What is the big lesson here?
This table really says it all, doesn't it? The two systems that were rooted in deep, living, human culture, both of them proved to be invincible. The one system that was based on pure mechanical complexity, that's the one that failed, again and again. The human element was Enigma's greatest weakness, but for the Guarani and the Navajo, it was their absolute greatest strength.
And that's really the big takeaway, I think. The idea that cultural depth, something we don't usually think of in military terms, can be an incredible strategic asset. A shared language is so much more than just words. It's a whole universe of shared memory and identity that is basically impossible for an outsider to ever truly break into.
And this is why this stuff matters so much. That story about the Navajo code talkers it's such a powerful and frankly uncomfortable lesson. The very cultural heritage that a government actively tried to destroy became the key to its own survival. It's an incredible testament to the hidden value, the hidden strength in preserving cultural and linguistic diversity.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on, one that's very relevant today. As we build these incredibly complex new systems to protect ourselves, things like AI and quantum encryption, are we running the risk of making the exact same mistake that the creators of Enigma did? Are we so focused on the technology that we're forgetting that the most unpredictable, the most exploitable, but also the most resilient and creative part of any system is always going to be us?